If you are holding 2000 XRP, the quietest rule change in Washington might matter more than every loud XRP countdown thumbnail you have seen this week. The FDIC is moving the stablecoin rulebook from theory to bank-ready infrastructure, and because RLUSD is already built for regulated rails, this could become the moment utility finally starts catching up with price. Now, I am not telling you every bank flips a switch tomorrow, or that XRP suddenly teleports to $10 overnight. I am telling you that when regulators stop speaking in vague principles and start defining how insured institutions can actually use compliant stablecoins, the market gets a blueprint. If you miss this blueprint, you miss where the next repricing can begin. By the end of this video, I will show you why the FDIC move matters, why RLUSD and XRP are connected, and what 2000 XRP could be worth if this rollout goes from quiet policy to real banking adoption. Most creators this morning are chasing the White House angle, and the next clarity headline, here's what this means if you're holding 1000 XRP right now. That makes sense, those stories are loud, but the undercovered sequel is in the plumbing for your XRP position. This translates to something very specific. The Genius Act gave Washington a stablecoin framework last year. The missing piece was operational guidance. Banks do not deploy payment infrastructure on vibes. They need reserve rules, custody rules, redemption rules, and a clear answer to one simple question: are we actually allowed to do this without getting punished later? Drop the year you first bought XRP in the comments, because if you have been here a while, you know the game often changes when the rails beneath the headline get approved. That is why this FDIC development matters. RLUSD already sits near $1.56 billion in market cap and was launched into a world where compliance is not optional. Add that to 7 US listed spot XRP ETFs, the resolved SEC case, and Ripple's hidden road acquisition, and you get the same tension the XRP community has felt all year: stronger infrastructure, weaker price. With XRP still hovering around $1.33, the market is telling you it still does not know how to price utility until regulators turn possibility into process. That is exactly what the FDIC is starting to do. Let me start with the simplest point. Stablecoin laws sound bullish. Stablecoin operating rules are what banks can actually use. An institution can love tokenized payments and still refuse to touch them if it does not know how reserves must be handled, how redemption works, or how examiners treat exposure. Once those questions start getting answered, adoption stops being a panel topic and starts becoming a strategy line item. That is why this is a quiet utility trade, not a hype trade. If RLUSD becomes one of the safest compliant dollar rails available, Ripple is no longer selling just a token story. It is selling a regulated settlement stack. Here is what that means for you if you are holding 2000 XRP. At today's price, that bag is worth about $2,660. If the market begins valuing XRP as part of a bank-ready stack instead of another altcoin, even a move back toward $4 to $5 turns that same bag into $8,000 to $10,000. Now let me deal with the biggest confusion head on. People hear stablecoin and assume XRP gets replaced. I think the opposite case is stronger. RLUSD is the regulated dollar unit. XRP is the bridge asset that can move value between markets when direct liquidity is thin or cross-border conversion needs speed. Think of RLUSD as the compliant entry point and XRP as the settlement engine beside it. Hidden road matters for the same reason. Ripple bought institutional relationships and a prime brokerage footprint that already touches massive annual volume. So ask yourself this: if the bank side becomes more comfortable holding and moving compliant stablecoins, what happens to the bridge layer sitting next to those rails when volume starts scaling? Here is what that means for you. If you are holding 2000 XRP, you do not need XRP to dominate every payment flow on Earth. You need it to capture a small slice of a much larger regulated network. If that network expands through RLUSD adoption, a move to $6 puts your 2000 XRP at $12,000. Let us talk size, because this is where the opportunity stops sounding abstract. The United States still has roughly 4,700 FDIC insured institutions. Serious adoption does not require every bank. It requires a credible early cohort. If even a few dozen banks decide that compliant stablecoin transfers can lower costs, speed up settlement, or improve treasury efficiency, the market suddenly has recurring volume instead of theoretical demand. And remember, the broader cross-border payments market is measured in the trillions. But wait, there is another timing layer most people are missing. The FDIC process is not happening in a vacuum. The Senate still has digital asset clarity questions in front of it, and institutional players are watching both stablecoin rules and broader market structure at the same time. Here is what that means for you if you are holding 2,000 XRP. If the market starts pricing in regulatory convergence instead of isolated headlines, a rate towards $7 turns that bag into $14,000. And yes, I know the pushback because I feel it too. XRP has had bullish headlines all year and prices still look sleepy. ETF launches did not trigger an instant explosion. Big partnership headlines did not trigger an instant explosion. So why should this be different? Because most of those headlines told the market what could happen. Operational rulemaking tells the market what institutions can actually do. Markets often ignore narrative until a workflow exists. Once a workflow exists, capital stops treating the story like optional upside and starts treating it like a deployable product. If this distinction surprised you, hit like right now, because I think it is the single most important thing to understand in this XRP cycle. Here is what that means for you. If you are holding 2,000 XRP in a conservative catch-up move back to $5, your bag is worth $10,000. In a stronger revaluation toward $10, your bag is worth $20,000. So let me give you 3 clean scenarios and keep them grounded. Scenario 1, slow adoption. The FDIC path becomes clearer. RLUSD keeps growing. A small number of institutions test compliant flows, and XRP benefits mainly from renewed confidence plus early utility demand. In that case, a $4.50 to $6 zone is realistic enough to model. Your 2,000 XRP becomes $9,000 to $12,000. Scenario 2, policy convergence. Final stablecoin rules arrive, RLUSD gains visible traction, and the market starts pricing XRP as part of a bank-facing settlement network instead of a legacy lawsuit story. In that case, an $8 to $12 range becomes easier to defend. Your 2,000 XRP becomes $16,000 to $24,000. Scenario 3, full re-rating. This is the higher conviction bull case where regulated stablecoin growth, ETF capital, and real payment corridor volumes start reinforcing each other. That is the scenario where XRP can stretch into the $15 to $20 range over time, which would put 2,000 XRP between $30,000 and $40,000. Do you think XRP breaks $10 after the FDIC path becomes clearer? Yes or no? Let me know in the comments. There is also a reason I like this angle more than the louder countdown content. Those videos often leave you with emotion and no framework. This story gives you a framework. Watch RLUSD market cap. Watch which institutions start talking about stablecoin infrastructure like treasury plumbing instead of crypto experimentation. Watch whether Ripple uses Hidden Road and its banking relationships to turn compliant stablecoin demand into actual network volume. Because if those rails keep strengthening while price stays compressed, that is exactly the kind of mismatch long-term holders should pay attention to. Here is what that means for you. If you are holding 2,000 XRP, if you wait until the market agrees this is real, you are probably not buying at $1.33 anymore. You are probably evaluating the same thesis at $5, $7, or $10. Now let me bring this back to your position as directly as possible. Remember what I said at the start, the quiet rule change may matter more than the loud headline. Here is why. The FDIC is not promising XRP gains. It is doing something more important. It is reducing the friction around compliant stablecoin use inside the regulated system. RLUSD is already positioned to benefit from that. And if RLUSD benefits, XRP has a better chance of being valued as the bridge and settlement asset sitting beside those rails. For a holder with 2,000 XRP, the conservative case is simple. If this shift only gets XRP back to $5 as utility confidence improves, your bag becomes $10,000. The bullish case is also simple. If final rules, RLUSD growth, and broader regulatory clarity push XRP toward $12 to $15, your bag becomes $24,000 to $30,000. That is a very different conversation from the $2,660 it is worth around current prices. One concrete action item: build a watch list around this thesis, track FDIC rule progress, RLUSD growth, institutional onboarding language, and any evidence of real settlement usage. If that checklist keeps improving while price still lags, the market may be giving you time it will not give you later. Also, pay attention to whether banks describe stablecoins as a deposit product, a payment rail, or a settlement tool. That language matters, because the closer this gets to ordinary bank workflow, the easier it becomes for the market to price XRP as infrastructure instead of speculation. None of this is financial advice, and there is still real execution risk here. Banks move slowly, regulators revise language, and markets stay irrational longer than anyone wants. But I would rather track a specific catalyst with measurable signals than chase another vague promise. Subscribe and hit the bell if you want XRP coverage that actually gives you a plan instead of pure hype. And if you know another XRP holder who is only watching the loud stories and missing the plumbing story, send them this video. Tomorrow, I am covering the next underpriced catalyst on the XRP board, and if this FDIC setup keeps developing, it may end up being one of the most important quiet signals of the year.